Welcome back, everybody. It is Monday again, which means somewhere out there, someone already said, new week, new me. Yeah, and by lunchtime they were stress eating while ignoring at least one email marked urgent. That's adulthood. Welcome to it. But while we've been out here trying to survive modern life, history's been reminding us humanity has always been a mess. This week we've got impossible escapes, disasters caught on live radio, world-changing inventions, and proof that people will do absolutely anything for a good prank. Also, quick update before we jump in. Something new is coming soon. Late nights, real conversation, less filters, and more honesty. Open line on Holden Radio. It's going to be different from Dravin's Den. Less scripted, more human. The kind of conversations people usually have after midnight when life gets quiet and the truth gets louder. So keep an eye out for that announcement very soon. But for now, let's step into this week in history. This is Dravin's Den. Hope, imagination, and a galaxy far away. For most people now, May 4th means one thing. May the 4th be with you. What most science fiction fans thought was started as a clever joke tied to Star Wars and has evolved into a worldwide celebration of one of the most influential film franchises ever created actually has a more historical context. The phrase May the 4th be with you was most famously coined in a public capacity by the British Conservative Party to congratulate Margaret Thatcher on her first day as Prime Minister. On May 4, 1979, the party placed a half-page advertisement in the London Evening News that read, "May the 4th be with you, Maggie. Congratulations." While the Thatcher ad is the most famous early use, the pun has appeared in several contexts. Clever newspaper writers originally used the phrase in the summer of 1978 as a gimmick for 4th of July celebrations, just 1 year after the release of Star Wars: A New Hope. Member of the UK Parliament Harry M. Cohen used the line during a defense debate on May 4, 1994, attributing the bad joke to a researcher. The first known published reference in a book appeared in The Science of Star Wars by Jeannie Cavalos. The first major organized Star Wars Day event was held at the Toronto Underground Cinema in Canada. But why May 4th? The date was chosen purely as a play on words. For the iconic Jedi blessing, "May the Force be with you," first spoken in the 1977 film by Obi-Wan Kenobi, portrayed by actor Sir Alec Guinness. But what's interesting isn't just the movies. It's what they represented. In the late 1970s, people were exhausted. The world felt tense, uncertain, heavy. And suddenly, here came a story about hope, redemption, rebellion, and ordinary people standing up against impossible odds. People connected to that. Still do. Because underneath the lightsabers and space battles, the story was always human. Fear, loss, temptation, redemption. History survives because people see themselves inside it, even in a galaxy far, far away. Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, is more than an excuse to consume copious amounts of tequila and tacos. That actually turns out. It commemorates the Mexican Army's unlikely victory over the French Empire at the Battle of Puebla on May 5, 1862. Contrary to a common misconception, it is not Mexican Independence Day, which is celebrated on September 16th. It actually celebrates a historical conflict. Following internal wars that left Mexico in financial ruin, President Benito Juarez suspended all foreign debt payments for 2 years in 1861. In response, Britain, France, and Spain sent naval forces to Veracruz to demand payment. While Britain and Spain negotiated and withdrew, France, under Napoleon III, used the opportunity to attempt to establish a French-backed monarchy in Mexico. A well-equipped French army of roughly 6,000 soldiers advanced towards Mexico City. On May 5, 1862, they were intercepted at Puebla by a significantly smaller, poorly equipped Mexican force of about 2,000 to 5,000 soldiers, led by General Ignacio Zaragoza. Now, if you think about it, what does that sound like to you? Kind of like the Alamo, huh? Despite being outnumbered, the Mexican forces successfully repelled the French, while the French eventually captured Mexico City a year later. The victory at Puebla became a lasting symbol of Mexican resistance and national sovereignty. But why is it big in the U.S.? Though it is a minor holiday, in most of Mexico, outside of Puebla, it is a major celebration in the United States. Mexican Americans in California began celebrating the victory as early as 1863 to promote democracy and resistance during the American Civil War. In the 1960s, activists elevated the holiday into a symbol of ethnic pride and cultural identity called the Chicano movement. These days, it has evolved into a widespread celebration of Mexican culture, often marked by parades, mariachi music, and traditional foods like mole poblano. Mole poblano. I'm not even sure I want to know. The disaster that changed air travel. The Hindenburg disaster was a catastrophic airship accident that occurred on May 6, 1937, at Naval Air Station Lakehurst in New Jersey. The LZ-129 Hindenburg, a massive German passenger airship filled with highly flammable hydrogen, caught fire and was destroyed in approximately 34 seconds while attempting to dock with its mooring mast. This tragedy, famously captured on newsreel film and described in a raw, emotional radio broadcast by Herbert Morrison, effectively ended the era of commercial passenger airships. The Hindenburg was supposed to represent the future. Massive, luxurious, elegant, a floating symbol of human engineering. And then, in less than a minute, it burned. 34 seconds, if you can believe it. The footage shocked the world. The famous radio broadcast, "Oh, the Humanity," became permanently burned into history. And almost overnight, public trust in airships collapsed. That's the strange thing about progress. Sometimes one disaster changes public perception forever. Maybe the Sith had its revenge after all. The day Europe finally exhaled. After years of destruction, death, bombings, occupation, and unimaginable loss, in May 1945, Nazi Germany signed 2 unconditional surrenders to the Allied forces, officially ending World War II in Europe. The first was signed on May 7th at General Dwight D. Eisenhower's headquarters in Reims, in Reims, France. Yeah, it's spelled differently. Anyway, a second definitive ceremony took place on May 8th, early May 9th Moscow time in Berlin at the request of the Soviet Union. The 2 signing ceremonies, Reims, May 7th, General Alfred Jodl, is it Jodl or Yodel? Yeah, signed the initial instrument of surrender at 2:41 a.m. Berlin, May 8th and 9th. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel signed a second document at the Soviet headquarters in Karlshorst to formally acknowledge the defeat to all Allied powers, including the USSR. Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, marked the beginning of the end of World War II in Europe and across cities around the world. People poured into the streets. Strangers hugged each other. Church bells rang. Crowds celebrated because something they weren't sure would ever end finally had. It's easy looking back to think people knew history would work itself out. They didn't. At the time, people were scared, exhausted, grieving, uncertain. That's what makes those celebrations powerful. Relief. Pure relief. The birth of a legend. A pharmacist in Atlanta created a caramel-colored drink that was originally marketed as a kind of medicinal tonic. That drink? Coca-Cola. On May 8, 1886, Dr. John Stith Pemberton sold the first glass of Coca-Cola at Jacob's Pharmacy in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Pemberton, a pharmacist, created a flavored syrup in a brass kettle in his backyard. He took the syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy, where it was mixed with carbonated water, initially by mistake, and pronounced excellent. A single glass cost 5 cents. Ingredients: the original formula contained extracts from cocoa leaves, which included cocaine, and cola nuts. Cocaine was not fully removed from the recipe until 1929. Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank M. Robinson, suggested the name Coca-Cola. Robinson penned the famous Spencerian script logo because he believed the two C's would look well in advertising. In its first year, the pharmacy sold only about 9 glasses per day. Total sales for the year were roughly $50, while expenses reached $70, resulting in a loss. It was initially marketed as a medicinal tonic to treat headaches, fatigue, and nervousness. Nobody at the time could have imagined it becoming one of the most recognizable brands on earth. And honestly, history is full of moments like that. Tiny beginnings, huge consequences. Something small becomes something global. Kind of makes you wonder how many world-changing ideas looked ordinary at first. The invention that quietly changed everything. On May 9, 1960, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, approved Inovid 10, the world's first commercially produced oral contraceptive. This milestone, often cited as a catalyst for the sexual revolution, granted women unprecedented control over their reproductive health. The pill was developed and made by G.D. Searle Company of Chicago. Birth control pioneer Margaret Sanger commissioned the research, which was funded by heiress Catherine McCormick. It was developed by biochemist Gregory Pincus and gynecologist John Rock. Inovid was the first approved in 1957, but only to treat menstrual disorders. Doctors often prescribed it off-label for birth control before the 1960 official approval. Within 2 years, 1.2 million American women were using the pill. Access to the reliable contraception allowed more women to delay marriage, stay in school longer, and enter professional careers. Despite FDA approval, some state laws still banned contraception. It wasn't until 1965 Supreme Court case Griswold v. Connecticut that married couples were guaranteed the right to use it. The 1960 version contained a significantly higher doses of hormones, up to 10 times the estrogen of modern pills, leading to severe side effects like blood clots and strokes. Today's formulations use much lower doses, maintaining effectiveness while greatly reducing health risks. A little historical note: at the time of approval, the FDA only cleared the pill for 2 years of use at a time due to concerns about long-term safety. And whether people agreed with it or not, society changed permanently afterward. For many women, it meant something previous generations never fully had: control over timing, family planning, and personal autonomy. History isn't always shaped by wars and presidents. Sometimes it's shaped by inventions that completely alter everyday life. Quiet revolutions still count. The impossible escape. The Civil War was ending. The Confederacy had collapsed. And Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, was on the run. Confederate President Jefferson Davis was captured by Union forces on May 10, 1865, near Irwinville, Georgia. His apprehension effectively signaled the final collapse of the Confederate government. Following the fall of Richmond on April 2nd, Davis and his cabinet fled south. He hoped to reach the Mississippi River, cross into Texas, and continue the war from the west. A detachment of the 4th Michigan Cavalry and the 1st Wisconsin Cavalry intercepted his party at dawn. He was traveling with his wife, Verena Davis, their children, and a small group of aides. A persistent rumor emerged that Davis attempted to escape disguised as in women's clothing. In the cold morning air, Davis had donned his wife's raglan, which is an overcoat, and a shawl over his own clothes. Union propaganda and newspapers like the New York Times widely circulated caricatures of him in hoop skirts and petticoats to ridicule the fallen leader. Davis was indicted for treason and suspected of complicity in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He was held for 2 years at Fort Monroe, Virginia, often in harsh conditions. He was never brought to trial, though, and he was released on bail in 1867. Notable Northerners, including Horace Greeley, helped post his bond. The site of his capture is now the Jefferson Davis Memorial Historical Site in Irwin County, Georgia. They caught him, and just like that, one of the darkest chapters in American history truly came to an end. There's something haunting about moments like that, though, because history spends years building massive movements, governments, and armies, and then sometimes it all ends quietly, in exhaustion, in defeat, in a muddy field far away from glory. The books that outlived their authors. In Germany, thousands of books were dragged into public squares and burned. Works by Jewish authors, political critics, intellectuals, and anyone considered unacceptable by the Nazi regime. On May 10, 1933, Nazi-aligned university students burned over 25,000 volumes of books deemed un-German in 34 university towns across Germany. Organized by the German Student Union as part of their action against the un-German spirit, works of Jewish, leftist, pacifist, and liberal authors, including Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud, Helen Keller, and Ernest Hemingway. The largest event took place at Opperplatz, now Babelplatz, where 40,000 people gathered to hear propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels declare the end of Jewish intellectualism. Students held torchlight parades and took fire oaths as they threw books into bonfires while bands played. Much of the material burned in Berlin was looted from Magnus Hirschfeld's pioneering research institute, including thousands of medical books and patient records. The event signaled the start of widespread state censorship and the re-education of Germany. News of the burnings led to massive demonstrations in the U.S. In New York City, up to 100,000 people marched in protest on the same day. The events are often linked to the 1821 words of German Jewish poet Heinrich Heine, where they burn books, they will ultimately burn people. Today, the Babelplatz in Berlin features the Empty Library Memorial by Micah Ullman, a sunken white room with empty shelves visible through a glass plate in the pavement. Because authoritarian movements understand something very clearly. If you control information, you control people. That's why censorship matters. That's why preserving stories matters. And that's why history keeps warning us about what happens when fear starts deciding what people are allowed to learn. All right, this week's entry in the What the Hell People file. Maybe we gave humanity, AI, a little too early. So, in South Korea, a wolf named Nugu escaped from a zoo near the city of Daejeon. Naturally, authorities launched a huge search effort. Police, firefighters, emergency teams. People were on edge because, there's a wolf roaming around. Seems important. But then, one guy decided the situation needed a little creativity. A 40-year-old man used AI to generate a completely fake image of the wolf wandering through the streets of Daejeon. And because this is the internet age, the image spread fast. People believed it. Authorities responded to it. Schools closed. Emergency teams were redirected. Meanwhile, the actual wolf was somewhere else entirely. Officials later said the fake AI image may have delayed the capture of the wolf by up to 9 days. 9 days. which means somewhere out there, exhausted emergency workers were chasing an AI generated wolf, while the real one was probably sitting in the woods thinking, these humans are incredibly easy to confuse. And now the man responsible could face prison time and heavy fines. Because apparently we've entered a point in history where Crying Wolf has been digitally remastered. History gave humanity artificial intelligence. And the first thing some people did was create fake wolf paparazzi photos during an active emergency. Outstanding work, everybody. History isn't only found in deadlines, or headlines, for that matter. It lives in families, in old photographs, passed down stories, quiet sacrifices nobody wrote books about. If your family has a story, send it in. Because preserving history starts with remembering the people closest to us. And some of the strongest stories never made the textbooks. Send those stories to dravinsden@gmail.com. This week reminds us how quickly things change. A war ends. A disaster reshapes trust. An invention changes society. An empire burns books because it fears ideas. And through all of it, people kept trying to build something better. That's the thread running through history. Not perfection, persistence. Human beings stumbling forward, learning slowly, often failing, but continuing anyway. And maybe that's what matters most. I'm Stan Miles, and that's the rest of history. Stay curious.